Ken Lavalette here from Woodwind Yachts, and welcome to the ACBS 2022 Spring Tour. Today we're going to show you a couple of boats in the shop that we're currently working on and take you for a little spin around here. There's 10 boats currently in the shop. We'll give you a quick rundown on what's going on. First of all, right here we have a 1967 25-foot sailboat called a folk boat. And last year we had a folk boat in the shop. This year this is a boat that we're working on. About 5 years ago we put a nice little 7 horsepower 1-cylinder gasoline engine in this boat. We're having a few little engine problems, so we've taken the engine out for some servicing, and it will be going back into the boat hopefully after some resurfacing. I had a motor very similar to this in my own folk boat. I sailed it from here to the Caribbean and back for a period of just over a year, and I got propelled to the Caribbean with one of these identical motors. It pushes you about the speed that you can walk, so it's a long walk to the Caribbean from here with this pushing you all the way. But nice little engines, nice and quiet, and they're very small and compact, and they fit nicely into the bilge of these 25-foot sailboats. This year, part of our project, this boat was a painted boat, so and it's never been varnished. So this year, the customer wanted the paint to be stripped down, and we thought that if the wood looked good enough, we were going to sand it and stain it and varnish it. Certainly after the paint came off the boat, I looked at it and said I thought it was doable to varnish it rather than repaint the boat. I'm glad I made that decision. The customer has not seen his boat yet, but he's about a week or so away from seeing it. I think he's going to be thrilled. When we stripped the paint down, there were still little flecks of paint in the wood that was a little bit unsightly. So what I did was I stained the boat. Once it was all stripped down and sanded, I stained the boat to unify the colors of the planking, and I stained it the natural mahogany color of the wood. And then after 4 coats of varnish, then I took a little artist brush. It took a couple of beers one night, and over the course of the evening, took the little artist brush, and I hand painted with the stain over top of all the little tiny flecks of white paint that were embedded in the grain of the wood, so that you couldn't see anything. And now I'm very proud to say that this job has turned out magnificent. I don't see any residue white paint. That you would never ever know that this was a painted hull in the beginning, and she's going to look just fabulous by the time she's done. She should be in the water in about 6 weeks from now, completely with a new water line and bottom paint, and we've got one more coat of varnish to go on. That'll be the 8th coat, and then she'll be done and ready for the water. Here you can see Tom hard at work sanding a 25-foot folk boat. Her name is Norder. He's sanding the 7th coat, getting ready for the 8th and final coat of this boat. From that angle you can see Tom hard at work, and the boss in the background, of course, here. Oh my goodness, this is hard work. Next we have a real nice old late 1940s 16-foot Peterborough rowing skiff. It's been in the family for a long time, but unfortunately she got stored incorrectly and full of water. She went to different places to have some repairs made. They filled the bilge with epoxy for a short-term repair, used the boat for another couple seasons, and then of course she would not float. So when she came in here, I said most of the ribs here needed to be replaced, and in fact we've replaced every single rib in this boat. There's about 50 odd ribs in here. We've done it systematically, and what we do at Woodwind is we'll take three original deteriorated ribs out and leave 6 of ribs in to help to hold the boat shape. And then take another 3 out and leave 6 in. And another 3 out and leave 6 in. And what we'll do is we will refinish the area that the ribs have been removed. That gives you a little bit of area to sand with the grain, rather than just trying to sand this little area like this. With 3 ribs removed, you've got some area to strip and sand the wood, and then we've sealed all the wood in behind the ribs with 3 coats of varnish. The new ribs also have 3 coats of varnish on the back side, so when they're actually steamed and put into the vessel, at the end of the project, there's no bare wood anywhere. Inside, underneath, behind the stems, under the new keel, everything is sealed with 3 coats of premium Epiphan's varnish. As you can see here, in the bilge, from here to here, we've left some of the old paint in here. This also was a painted boat, and it's going to be varnished as well. You can see, if you look close, you can see the little flecks of white paint here and here and here. I'm going to use the same treatment on this boat near the completion as I did on the folk boat. I'll come out here one evening and have a couple of beers with my little artist brush and touch up all the little bits of white paint, and then we'll put the last 4 coats of varnish over top of that, so that the stain is trapped under several coats of varnish for protection, and you're never going to know that this was a painted boat. Right now we still have to take out a lot of the rotten ribs here in the bilge, and they're going to be taken out probably 2 each side at a time, and then new planks made and sealed and then installed little by little until we reach the garter planks. Then there will be a new inner keel and outer keel made, and it will fit exactly around those ribs. It will all be sealed and installed, and then we'll catch up the face of these ribs with 3 coats of varnish, and then continue on with another 4 coats of varnish on the whole boat. We have already replaced both stems, as you can see here. We've got a new stem both ends here. It's all nicely shaped, same as the original. Lovely laminated white oak stems. And this boat's about half or just over halfway through the completion right now. She will be varnished inside and out, and the owners are really looking forward to seeing her completed, hopefully by near the end of the summer. Here in the shop, lastly, I'm going to show you a 1932 20-foot Gidley power launch. It's owned by a well-known distinguished member of the ACBS named Mr. Patrick Keefe. He has entrusted the complete rebuilding of this lovely old Gidley to us. We are replacing every steam bent white oak rib in the boat, the stem, the keel, every plank on the boat, and a lot of the deck beams, all the deck boards, half or 2/3 of the cockpit. So it is a major overhaul. I would say at the completion of this project we will have probably replaced about 80% approximately of this boat. It will have some of the original framework that was still in good shape. It will have that in the boat, and she will have the original transom. We'll get around and show some pictures of the original transom. I'm glad the transom's not going to be varnished on this boat because it's a bit unsightly. We've managed to salvage the original transom, but it's going to be a painted transom, but certainly is going to be structurally fine. But in this boat, like I said, she came in here, we took the decks off, all the interior out of the boat, we turned her upside down. First we steam bent in the same manner as I talked earlier. We replaced all the ribs in this boat systematically in sections and in stages. And then after the ribs were done, we turned the boat upside down. And starting at the garboard planks, we have replanked the boat completely. The original project was to replank the bottom 1/3, but then the owner decided no, he just wants a real good, brand new, solid hull. So we've decided to replank her completely. She just got flipped 2 weeks ago, and the top 2 boards have just gone on over this last couple of weeks. We're making really good progress with her. Next there's going to be some interior framework and things like that, and then the decking will start, and so on and so on. We had hoped that maybe this boat might be ready for the Gravenhurst show this year, but I think we're just over halfway, maybe two-thirds, not quite two-thirds of the way through the restoration. Don't think she's going to make it this year, but by golly, we're going to get her there next year, and you'll see this lovely old boat finished at the Gravenhurst show at 2023 for sure. It will be probably my pleasure to show this boat and talk about the restoration. It'll be an on-land display, as I usually do at the Gravenhurst shows, and I will be very proud to show this along with her owner to everyone who attends next summer's Gravenhurst Antique and Classic Boat Show. All the wood in behind the ribs has been sealed. All the planks are built and then sealed properly with paint and then installed. The backs of the ribs have all been sealed with 2 coats of thin paint to preserve them before they were steam bent in the boat. At the end of the project, at the end of the interior assembly, we will sand and paint all the bare wood in here and then 1 final coat on the entire interior. Then of course the decks will get fitted. The undersides of the decks will get sealed with 3 or 4 coats of varnish. The tops will probably get 8 or 10 coats of varnish on the top sides, along with the deck caulking, etc. And all the jingle jangle that goes at the end, the windshield and the motor, of course, and the seats and upholstery and all the razzle dazzle that's really going to make this boat just jump to life at the end. She's going to be a beauty. There you can see a picture of the transom, the original transom that we removed and restored and reinstalled. And if you come around the back, you'll see why I'm really glad we're going to paint it. She was originally a painted transom, so she will be painted again, and of course her name will be hand painted on the transom. What you can't see on the hull planking is all of the planks have been fitted with cotton caulking. Every single plank is caulked with cotton. We made up a special planer blade. It's got just a little notch in it. So once the plank is made and fitted to the boat, then Luke will take the special plane with the blade in it and run it down once, just putting a little tiny little groove in the planking. Then the plank is coated with wet varnish, and then a second coat of wet varnish. The cotton is carefully laid into the wet varnish, and then the next plank is put onto the boat. You're never going to see any of this. This boat will float, and the leakage will be minimal with this traditional cotton caulking. We've used this method on many boats with great success over the years.
Woodwork by Kevin. I'm Kevin. This is a project I've been working on this winter time. This is a 16-foot Peterborough, and I had a customer that brought me a boat last year that was just too far gone to restore. So what I did is I pulled the plans off of it, lifted the lines, made a mold, and built this. So it's pretty original. I believe this is a Seafarer model. There was no markings on the boat, so it's just from some research that I've done. So instead of going with cedar, we went with an African mahogany, and we got some white oak for our splash rail, our future shear rail, and all our ribs inside are all white oak as well. What I've done with this, I've used modern technology using epoxy, West System, so everything's been West System, coated, glued. But I also went with the traditional nails, copper nails, to keep the same look, but not just rely on epoxy, but also have the fasteners that were desired. The bottom has been fiberglassed using the West system as well, so it's a dry boat, and we're working on her pretty much every day, and we're going to hopefully have her done by June. Just finishing up the decks here. I got some interior enough to do, and then a whole bunch of finishing. So the construction on this boat, the hull, I used like a canoe cove where I had a half round and a fillet taken out of it. And then what I liked about that is as you move it around, you get a nice filling. And it's epoxied in there in between as well as epoxied on the back. The sides were 3/8. On the decking, I didn't want to have the nails. I went with a little thicker. I went with 1/2 inch so that I could drill and plug it. And it's a little bit stronger if you're kneeling on it, just less flex and stuff like that. So that was the desire. So as you can see inside, all of these frames were all oak. I used quarter sawn oak, and what I did is I actually made a bath and soaked it for 3-4 days in water before I steamed it, and that helped an awful lot. I was able to steam bend them, and I think I only lost maybe maybe 3 tops ribs through the whole process that didn't make the round. Everything's been epoxied 2 times in here, and everything in here is all ready for the floor, which is going to be our next project. So this is the transom, obviously, and I'd like to put a well in when possible. We're going to go with a 20-inch transom, so it'll be a long shaft outboard. The well, I don't know that it was original to the boat, but I feel that it adds a tremendous amount of strength, as well as if you're out fishing on a following sea, you're not ending up with all that water inside the boat, so it'll have some drain holes and stuff like that. I'm a fan of building it in and giving that extra strength. This boat, from what I gathered from my research, probably would have had a pair of 35 Johnson Javelins on it, so it can take 70 horse. With the strength that I've put into this boat, I had no problem taking 70. I don't know exactly what we're going to put on yet, somewhere 50, 60 horsepower, I suppose.
My name is Matt Fairbrass. I want to welcome you to Whiteside Mechanical. I'm located in Port Carling, Ontario. Beautiful Lake Muskoka at my back door. I'm a pretty lucky fella to have the shop and be here. I'm going to talk about a couple of things today, trying to keep it interesting. I'm a licensed mechanic. I've been doing this for 44 or some years, and a lot of things have come and gone through my doors, and a lot of skills are obtained, and you learn a lot through friends and people, and by getting involved in these vintage motors, you have to have a real appreciation for the engineering and some of the really clever things that have been done to marinize engines. This engine in particular is a Kermath that started life as a marine engine. I really like these models because they're really well thought out. Cast iron oil pans. They have extremely heavy heads. They've got big heavy cranks and mains. It's also a very, very heavy engine, but they endure. This engine is probably around 70 years plus old. Parts are scarce, but they are available. I'm going to talk about how this engine got here, and a little bit about the owner and his love for the boat, but just going to point a few things out while I'm got your attention at the moment. We did an upgrade on it. Hopefully you can see that. We put electronic voltage regulators in. A lot of the problems we're having is charging circuits and poor performance with generators in general. They cause a lot of service calls, which is expensive and it's very time consuming. So we're trying to keep upgrading. Some engines we've actually put alternators on, again, so we can get low RPM charging. It's really important that obviously you're replenishing what you're using. But a lot of boaters are kind of, I call putt-putt people, and they just don't run fast enough to charge. This takes care of that problem. The engine's been a complete rebuild. It was not bored over. The bore was in excellent condition. Re-ring, new bearings and shells, all new valves and guides and seats. But again, quite a well looked after motor. It's been test run. They always get test run here for at least a couple of hours. There's not too much else to say about this engine, other than everything has to work in harmony. Everything has to be rebuilt. A spray can rebuild isn't going to cut it, guys. If you're into this, you're into it for the long haul. I get kind of tired of stuff coming in. I call it the CIL rebuild. Can of paint, oh, it's rebuilt. Well, it's not. So know what you're buying. If you're purchasing a boat, make sure that you've got some documentation on the engine. Normally you'll never find it. I would love people to keep ship logs. I would love people to keep great records. Very seldom does that happen. So it's a kind of a buyer beware thing. Anyway, the story on this motor, I was approached by one of the club members. He and his wife are out on Georgian Bay. They cottage there their entire lives, which is probably some 50 odd years, 60 years now. And this gentleman used to captain a guide boat when he was very young, about 16 or so. Did that for several summers and absolutely enjoyed himself to no end. And drove this one particular boat. Well, he went back in years later and discovered the boat. There were 7 or 8 of them. The guide boats on the Georgian Bay were a very, very big thing. Anyway, he bought the boat, and of course the engine that was in it, well, he knew the engine intimately. It was rather kind of funny telling me how he hand cranked this. Well, it's amazing he could hand crank this, but apparently he did, because the battery went dead all the time. So been purchasing the boat, decided, okay, well, we're going to do the engine over properly. He's a successful businessman now, and this is his world. The boat's been worked on for a couple of years now, so this engine will go back in, installed. We will do the setup on the engine. All the ancillaries are hooked up, make sure it's working properly, and it'll last him a lifetime. These engines really don't wear out. So I think enough said on that. It's just great to see someone's passion, and for me to be able to bring it to life again with an understanding that reliability is paramount, like the generator, the charging, that type of thing. So anyway, thank you for that. So some of the things that I do here at Whiteside are rather unique. This is actually not a marine part per se. This is a flathead Ford V8. Certain boats do have flathead Ford V8s. They're rare. And there's some good conversions and some not so good conversions. However, this is still an electric component. It's points ignition. Again, flathead Ford V8. This is a 1941. This piece came to me covered in mud, being in a truck. It was a farm truck. It came in pretty grimy and grim condition. Replacement parts are hard to find, but they are available. Again, if this isn't working, your vehicle isn't working. This is the heart of the machine. Ignition, whether it's standard type ignition you'd find on points like on a flathead engine or a V8 Ford, it has to be working. The components internally have been completely restored and rebuilt. There's nothing that hasn't been really gone over, from the bearings to bushings, points, etc. So just one of the things that needs to be looked at, frequently overlooked, but eventually it's going to come back and haunt you if you don't look at it and deal with it. So I'm going to come over here. You're really not complete in building distributors and equipment if you don't have a sun tester or a sun distributor machine. This is a very old machine. I actually have 2 others that are newer. This is kind of my favorite. Found this in a barn, completely rebuilt it. You may not look at it, but the electronics and things and capacitors are all new. Without this, I can't do this. So, another thing, when you buy old machinery, you find exciting things. I get excited by it. The adapter. This is an adapter that is extremely rare. It is designed for the Ford Flathead and the Ford Flathead V8 only. So, lucky me, found it in the box, put it together. Awesome. So I can actually bolt this unit on. So it's like so. Spins it at various RPMs. I have different gauges that tell me advanced mechanisms. It tells me dwell angles. I even have a vacuum pump on it, because this particular unit has a vacuum cell. So You pretty much dial it in according to what the manufacturer specs are. Back in the day, a mechanic had to really know what to look for. He had to know how to research what was needed. This little band across the top is interesting on this machine. This happens to have Packard listed. These are little rollers, they're in paper. So a mechanic can look at the model of the car, the distributor number of the car, and all of the pertinent information that he needs. They were clever back then. We think we're clever now. They were really clever. So great to have, a must-have unit so that I can build a proper unit for the customer. Okay, hello everybody. I've got to be a more conventional distributor in the distributor machine. I'm proud of this machine, so I'm going to show you how it works and what it's all about. Again, there's many things that are taken into account. Dwell, distributor RPM. This is actually battery of the machine. This is actually a battery operated unit. So again, pretty early stuff, but it works. The distributor mounts on here. It's clamped in place, has its own power supply. As you see, it's running at very low speed right now. I turn it on. I have energized the unit. This would be an extremely low idle. I'm at, let's say, 200 RPM. This is half of crankshaft, so if it had an engine that ran at 400 RPM, this is about how fast your distributor would be running. So I have different increments on here that you can see. There's many setups involved in this thing for dwell angles as well as vacuum advance and things. I'm going to keep it pretty straightforward. You can see this light flashing. I'm going to actually go turn off the lights so it's a little easier to see. Okay, back again. I'm going to increase the RPM and speed of the unit. You'll watch that needle. It'll start moving. As it moves, what causes that to move is the distributor has internal weights that fly out, and it actually rotates the cam, or lobes, if you will, lobe assembly, into an advancing situation. So by spinning, centrifugal force throws the weights open, changes your timing. As the engine speeds up, it needs to fire earlier in the cycle to maximize its efficiency. So as I speed up, I don't know if you can see that, but we're now at 500 RPM, which would be 1,000 engine RPM. This unit has about 5 or 7 degrees. They all vary in the amount of advancement that is in it. That's already designed into the unit. So swapping distributors around with motors is not always a good idea. You have to be sure that you know what your advanced mechanism is supposed to be for that particular motor. But I can also really wind this up far beyond anything that this will ever run in an engine in real life. But what it does do, it allows me to check the switching of the points. At this kind of RPM, I have no breakdown, I have a very even pattern, I'm fully advanced, I can see that my dwell is very steady, and I also have no shaft bend, because each point is lining up perfectly. A bent shaft will cause oscillation. So I can bring it back down, and you'll see it's returning back to its rest position. And that's the Suntest unit.